read about a new strategy. And I think it's very interesting and something I want to share with you today. So the concept is using a mediocre vaccine. Something that, some people would say is not ready for prime time. And I think that it's a great strategy going forward. In fact, I think it's the only real strategy we have. Vaccines take a long time. Years. Developing them isn't easy. You have to test. Usually you have a threshold for how good they have to be. But remember, these are different times. And maybe we don't actually want the best right now. There's actually precedent for this in the medical field. People come into the hospital and think they get the best treatment. And, the doctor will justify saying you're getting the best treatment. But remember, there is no such thing as best. For example, if you come in for an infection related to bacteria, we'll give you antibiotics. But we may not give you the best antibiotics. A journalist was writing about this, saying that, it's funny how in every other field you would try the best first. But in the medical field, they try sort of the worst first. And if that doesn't work, then they'll try something better. And that's actually correct. What he means is that we don't try the biggest, the strongest antibiotics first. We try sort of a very limited antibiotic first to see if it works. We evaluate the person to see if they have some risk of bacterial resistance. And if they don't, we go ahead and try something that's sort of, we call not as broad spectrum, not effective against resistant bacteria. And the reason we justify it that way is because we say, well, these stronger antibiotics have higher risk. That's actually not true for certain antibiotics. Some of the newer ones are very powerful, but they don't have higher risk. What we think is they might have higher risk for developing resistance if we just use it too broadly. So we're preserving it for the future. But it's the same thing with a stroke. So if someone comes in with a new stroke, and we can't figure out why, we're saying, okay, you should probably take an aspirin every day. If they return with another stroke and we still can't figure out why, we'll upgrade them to Plavix, so clopidogrel, because it's stronger. Well, why wouldn't you just give them Plavix first? Because it has more side effects. It's a higher risk for bleeding. But is this a discussion that we have with them? No, we just sort of do this because this is what we do. Remember, we don't believe in the concept of, quote, best. And so right now there's a discussion as to what is actually the best strategy for vaccines. It was hosted by Moderna, that company I told you about, which is doing mRNA vaccines. They had a lot of different people on the call. And there's a Mark Dennison, he's a pediatrics infectious disease doctor, who said that there's evidence that immunity doesn't necessarily have to be sterilizing or even comprehensive. Immunity that is incomplete is likely to lead to infections that are milder, even if you can't get absolute protection. That's a primary goal that may be more achievable. Remember when we talked about neutralizing antibodies that inactivate the bacteria and make it so they can't do anything, or the virus? You don't even have to have an immune system because they're sort of inactivated. Well, it's hard. It's probably easier to do something easier, right? Somebody else talked about a vaccine with 50% effectiveness. Remember we said there are two types of effectiveness, two ways of measuring, partial or all or nothing? Well, pertussis, which I said wears off, the first 3 years is 95%. 50%? Is that the same as flipping a coin? No, it's not. The concept is timing is everything. It's better to have something not the best right now versus waiting till later when we are basically just sitting around doing nothing. So if we have something that's not as great a vaccine, but that converts us from being a life-threatening illness, this novel coronavirus 2019, to something that's more just like the common cold, isn't that of great benefit? We're not saying people won't get it. We're just saying, yeah, you'll probably still get it. It just won't be as bad. Remember, we don't know what everybody needs. We can't see your immune system. There's no bank account for your immune system. We can't check to see how much in savings. We can't test how strong it is. We don't have actually great ways of doing that either. But we presume some people's immune systems need more and some people's need less. And maybe a little bit is good enough for most people's immune systems, such that they could fight this off. They're not going to go to the ICU because all their organ systems have shut down because they can't breathe. There's precedent for this. Let me give you some examples. Let's think about cars. Have you seen that test of a 2016 Toyota Corolla versus a 2006 Toyota Corolla? They crashed them, and guess which does better? Obviously, the dummy in the 2016 Corolla. It's not even there's no doubt that cars just have been getting so much safer. Let's say you need a car. So is your solution that because cars will be safer in 10 years to not buy a car right now and to buy one in 10 years? What about right now? You'll just sort of not have a car. I guess you could walk then. I remember attending a conference at Harvard. It was a conference where there's a famous speaker, Braunwald. He's one of the sort of founders of modern cardiology. He was giving me a talk, so I had to go and attend. But there are other very interesting topics they discussed. And one was when these speakers are all world renowned. And one was asking the speaker about transcatheter replacements. So the idea is that, for a heart surgery in the past, it was all open. You crack some guy's chest open and then you operate on the heart. There's a lot of morbidity. There's some mortality. It's high risk, right? You got to put them on bypass because you can't have their heart working. You got to stop their heart, right? Because if you're sewing stuff up, you can't have their heart moving. And so you have this other machine that's taking care of all the heart-lung functions. And so now we don't like that. We don't like invasive procedures like surgery. So they've developed other ways of doing the heart. And, stents are pretty commonplace. Most people know about it. But heart valves are sort of the new frontier. And the question is, how much can you do replacement-wise? This was a few years ago. There were still limitations. But, the cardiologist was saying if you could choose to have an open heart surgery versus to have it done sort of transcatheter, they're going through your blood vessels, they don't actually open up your chest, which one would you rather have? So we all knew that the problem with the ones going through the blood vessels is that the valves aren't so permanent. They don't last very long, maybe a few years. So is this a question about investment in the surgery, a longer recovery, harder, but it's going to be more permanent? Or is it just sort of by, doing a Band-Aid solution? And the funny thing is he actually didn't talk about it like a Band-Aid solution. He said, well, I'd rather have a transcatheter replacement. Because in a few years, they're going to have a better one available. And then they could just do it again. And his idea is he's reliant on technology, on continued progress. Yeah, right now, where it seems like we're building a bridge that's not going to take us all the way across. It's going to take us maybe a third of the way there. But don't worry, we're going to be able to build more coming a few years later, right? So I think the idea that these people have suggested is that, vaccines will get better. Everybody's working on that. We trust that we will have a great vaccine out, say by 5-10 years. The problem is we don't have anything to use right now. It's not great facing this quote enemy called the coronavirus without any defenses. Yeah, we don't have wonderful defenses, but it's better to have something than nothing. And let's just get that out now. We're not going to hold this vaccine to the same standards we hold other vaccines. Times have changed. If you look at computers, right? Everybody was wowed at the development of the personal computer. It was only, this big, this tall, right? And it was so powerful. It had few hundred kilobytes of memory. Amazing. Our phones are more powerful than that nowadays. Our phone, which is tiny. But if we didn't have the personal computer, we wouldn't have the phone. It's stepwise. We learn from doing things. This vaccine, even as mediocre, isn't just going to help because it provides some defense. It's going to help because it gives us practical feedback on what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And I think that's why it's a wonderful idea. I don't know how well it's going to be received because I think it's a very complicated topic, this idea of not doing the best. You know, President Trump wants the best for everything. Americans want the best, right? Everybody wants the best. But when time is important, maybe waiting for the best is not the right solution. We should just try something that works a little bit, that's available now. So that's my explanation of this discussion of using a mediocre vaccine and having actually a strategy forward out of this mess.